Take a look at this. Ooh, Amazon. You see that? This is the story about my attempt to start an guitar amplification company in Brazil. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and I lived in Chicago for about 21 years, moved to Los Angeles, lived there for about 7 years, and then moved to the north of California, and I lived there for about 5 years, and that's where I met my wife, who is from Brazil. And we eventually moved to Brazil. And I lived in Brazil 26 years. Not consecutively. 6 years at one time, and then a break back to the US, and then 20 more years in Brazil after that. And I had the brilliant idea of starting my own amplification company, guitar amplifiers, because the costs of producing this in Brazil were very, very cheap at this time. And how this all happened was very interesting. Well, I was living in a city called Londrina, which is in the state of Paraná. It's a beautiful city, about 500,000 people at the time. A great place to raise a family. Just an all-around wonderful place. I loved living in Londrina. But while I was there and working in music, I decided that, hey, let's start an amplifier company. Let me start an amplifier company. And I had no idea how to do this, of course. But eventually I met, there was a famous country duo in Brazil called Teodoro and Sampaio. And I met the son of Teodoro, who was actually the drummer for his father, Teodoro, in the group. And we did some business together. And through our business association, I began to ask him if he knew anybody who knew how to take care of amplifiers, how to maybe build amplifiers. And he told me, I have a person for you. This guy is a genius. A genius. And I was, really? He said, his name is Mr. Antonio. And he is the best in the business. If you want him to build you a guitar amplifier, he can do it. And I said, great. Do you have the contact information? And he said, sure. I will introduce you to Mr. Antonio. And I was like, whoa, this is great. Fantastic. Let's go. And so he did. He introduced me to Mr. Antonio. I spoke with Mr. Antonio, who, by the way, was an elderly gentleman in his 70s who lived on a small ranch in Londrina. And I explained to him what I wanted. I wanted something similar to a Marshall or a Laney, at least 50 watts and 100 watts. And could he do this for me? And he said, sure, he could. And I was really, all right. So we got some schematics of the Marshall amps and some Laney amps, so he could see what I was looking for. And he said, okay, but you want a distinct sound? And I said, yes, but I want to use EL34 tubes. He said, okay, no problem. He said, but I'm going to give you a special transformer, which I am going to wind myself. I'm like, okay, sure. And so Mr. Antonio began work on the project. And to go along with the project, he also created a speaker cabinet for me, so I would be able to test the amplifier. And after a couple weeks, after all the things were put together, all the pieces were put together, he invited me over to his house to hear the amplifier and the speaker cabinet. And my wife and I went to his ranch to see the finished product. Well, let's say not the finished product, but the project that was in the works. Okay? When I tested the amplifier, I was amazed. It sounded incredible. Just incredible. My wife was shocked when she heard this thing. I was shocked. I was like, wow. Oh my God. Because always there was a little doubt in my mind that he could do this, but he did it. And he said to me, would you like to take the cabinet home? And I said, sure, let me take the cabinet home. And he said, it's going to take me another week or so of working on the amplifier to finish everything. Okay. All right, that's great. So I took the cabinet home. And that's when things got interesting. Now, when I say things got interesting, a third party came into the picture. And that third party was Mr. Antonio's son. And I believe he was living in another city and another state. But he came to visit his father. And he went into his father's workshop, and he saw that his father was building an amplifier, or 2 amplifiers, I think it was at that time. And he said, Dad, what is this? And Mr. Antonio said, I'm building this project for an American, and it's a very interesting project. It sounds great, this amplifier. Okay? And he is thinking about starting his own amplifier company here in Brazil. And I am going to be the designer. And I'm going to help build these amplifiers. And the son said, ooh, an American guy, a gringo. Aha. He said, Daddy, how much will you make from this? And Mr. Antonio said, well, he's going to pay me for this project here first, and then we will work out the details after that. And the son said, Daddy, you cannot do this for a cheap price. I will take over for you here and negotiate with the gringo. And that is when troubles began. The son thought I was a rich American guy, which I wasn't. Not by a long shot. And the son decided that, well, my father, he's a genius and everything, and you're going to have to pay for this. And he came up with a very, very high price. And I tried to explain to him, no. I'm not a rich man, and I'm not trying to take advantage of your father, right? Or anything. But this price that you're quoting me is just way too expensive. It makes no sense, because I'm going to have to charge the same kind of money as they do in America or England for these amplifiers. No, I cannot do this. And he said, well, it's up to you, my friend. You either pay or bye-bye. And I did not pay. And the project finished. And I never got my amplifiers. The son said, well, if you want to get the amplifiers, you're going to have to pay much more for these amplifiers than what my father quoted you. And it was a crazy price. And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. No way. No way. And so Amazon amps died. Bye-bye, Amazon. Now, there is a funny story that happened with Mr. Antonio during this period of time. And my wife's uncle, his name was also Antonio, and he had died that year. He was a judge in the city of Campo Grande in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. A very, very good guy, a really nice person. One of the best people I've ever met in my life, really. He'd give you the shirt off his back. Well, her uncle died, and it was very sad. He's just a wonderful man. But how this relates to Mr. Antonio building the amplifiers is this. After my wife's uncle had died, I guess it had been a month or so, Mr. Antonio, the amplifier builder, he called my house to speak with me. This is before his son was involved. So he calls my house, and my teenage son, Philip, answers the phone. And Mr. Antonio actually sounded like my wife's uncle Antonio. A very similar type of voice. So my son answers the phone, and Mr. Antonio says, hello, who's speaking? And my son said, this is Philip. And Mr. Antonio says, Philip, this is Chio Antonio. Chio is uncle. And my son, his face went white. And we were looking at him. We looked at him and said, Phil, what's the matter? And he held the phone, he covered it, and he said, Daddy, it's Uncle Antonio on the phone. Didn't he die? It's like, what? What? I said, give me the phone. They grabbed the phone, and of course, I discover it's Mr. Antonio, the amplifier builder. And it was really funny for all of us, because my son was thinking he was speaking with the ghost of his uncle Antonio, who died a month previous to that. And that was the humorous part of that whole incident for Amazon amplifiers. And I'm sure Blue Cheer would have loved these amplifiers.